Before we get into all the incredible things we're going to talk about, go back to the co-ventures part. Tell us a little more about why this entrance into starting something that not only is very complex and involved, but also in a lot of ways is coming from someone who's an operator, going much more now as an investor and somebody who's helping operators. I'm fascinated. How did you get into it and why?
I think there is a thread between all of the activities I'm doing at the moment, I have done for a really long time, which is I get so much joy and so much purpose out of accelerating others. And my mum was an entrepreneur. I watched her build businesses from day one and kind of learned at her knee how to operate a small business. She never did the kind of venture-backed startup. She did it as a single mum, needing to provide for 2 kids and have flexibility to care for us, but money to put food on the table. And I think that kind of ingrained in me early. I saw how hard it was for her to build businesses, for how hard it was for her to get credibility to kind of corral resources around what she was doing. And that really made an impression on me early on. I did a little kind of tour of duty round past the law and then kind of came back to entrepreneurship. And have just got so much purpose in everything that I've done, from accelerating other folks. And so as an operator, I always tried to kind of share what I was learning and share, kind of write things and try to share those insights. And then came to executive coaching after operating because I had a series of wonderful, wonderful executive coaches that changed my experience of being an operator and made it from what I think otherwise would have been one of the hardest periods of my life to one of the funnest, most growth-oriented, like really just lit my brain on fire with insights. It felt like at every moment I was training, which was just such a wonderful feeling. And the activity of being an executive coach is your job is to accelerate your client. You are there in the corner for them, thinking about how best you can help them perform better and better and better. And that it's not a big intellectual leap from that to investing in those folks. And they're the same folks, right? Same people, same founding team, same CEOs.
Yeah, those radio waves are there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so I started angel investing when I first moved to America, and really was just this lucky recipient of an incredible community of people, some of whom happened to be women, and it's the first time I'd ever met female investors, and watched them and was like, that's really cool. I really want to do that. I want to support others by putting my money where my mouth is. And this is at a time when I'm earning like $75,000 in San Francisco, which I don't know if you ever lived in San Francisco, but that is not a lot of money. That's like the cost of rent.
Barely making it.
Right. And so I was kind of siphoning off very small amounts to the side, writing really small checks. And with that small check would come, you know, my entire heart and everything I could give them to support them as they were growing. And as I continued to do that, I just really loved that version of accelerating founders, that version of supporting them. And during the pandemic, I went back to Australia for a really short period of time, or what I thought was going to be a really short period of time, and met these incredible founders, like world-class founders that are like very competitive relative to the founders I was meeting through Stanford and through the kind of venture funds that had backed my previous company. And the resource environment they were operating in was like a fraction of what the US investors were getting. And so I just started angel investing and loving that journey and like feeling like I could make much more impact and help accelerate those individuals building these wonderful companies that had global footprint, which kind of, I think a lot of Americans don't realize how many global unicorns and decacorns have come out of Australia, just because they don't put Australia anywhere on the branding.
It's not in their world of things to pay attention to.
Yeah, like Atlassian, Afterpay, Cultureamp, Linktree, Canva. I think Canva is currently the most valuable private company above any others, and it happens to be founded by Australians. So I was kind of watching this, these founders develop and grow, and candidly, I had just kind of focused on angel investing, investing your own money. You can invest in whatever you want. You can focus on generating value, but you can make some kind of side bets on the side, or impact bets on the side. And then it came to my attention that Australia had never had a solo GP who was a woman. So I had this incredible journey where I had met these wonderful, wonderful investors who were women, kind of the Teresa Gowes, the Aileen Lees of the world, and they're kind of telling me about investing in Facebook early on, and they're kind of telling me about these journeys they've been on, and I'm so inspired, and kind of that had up-leveled what I thought was possible for myself, and just really incredibly grateful that they had pushed that frontier so that I could follow in their footsteps. And I realised coming back to Australia that the Australian women didn't have that. They didn't have anyone who said to them, hey, you can actually do this by yourself.
Why is that?
What's
your thoughts?
I think there's a couple of reasons. And to be clear, there's some wonderful investors down there, and now a lot more who are women who've been kind of promoted internally. So there are examples of it, but it's still very thin on the ground in terms of a diverse set of perspectives deploying dollars into the Australian ecosystem. And I think there's a couple of reasons. One is just it's a much smaller ecosystem. There's 20 million people in Australia. There's 350 or 360 million people in America. So just like the reps are lower frequency. Another is they just have been doing it for less time. So the kind of, especially Bay Area ecosystem has been out there compounding, since Hewlett Packard. Mm-hmm. Whereas, Australia's Atlassian's kind of the first cornerstone company coming out of Australia. There's been some before that, but that's been the kind of first kickoff, and a lot of the Atlassian alumni came back into the ecosystem and founded, our first big venture fund and all of these things. So I think there's just we've spent less time on target. So we've got slower reps, less time on target, which means there's just less people that were aware that it was something to spend your time on. There was less people who were kind of changing the way that things were done, and naturally that meant less women were participating. I think the other thread is that culturally Australia is a little bit more Scandinavian in that way. There's kind of a race to the middle. Everyone tries to be similar to each other, and the US, there's a race to the extremes. And so everyone's trying to find ways to be different from each other. And I think that environment just fosters a dynamic where someone is like, oh, no one has done this before. I'm going to go and try and do that thing. And I think that culture is changing in Australia, and it's definitely less prevalent in the kind of tech ecosystem where people are trying to kind of change the face of things and make a really solid dent in the world. But I think the combination of those things means that just no one has thought to do it yet, and or has been exposed to the environment sufficient that they've got the reps, that they're kind of credible to do the thing. But I think that will change really quickly. Actually, there's a kind of proud moment for me, and a very exciting moment was, as I said, one of the big motivators was to show that this was possible and to share with others that it's possible so that they will think about building something similar for themselves. And I thought that would take a year or two, right? Like someone will hear about it and be like, oh, I want to do that. And then they'll start angel investing and kind of ramp up.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation with a wonderful woman, a girl called Jess Walker at a fund called Airtree. She's on their kind of community platform side. She's an angel investor, really incredible at building community around her. And we were talking about the fund and talking about co-ventures, and she was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'd love to do that. 3 months later, she's like, I think I want to start a fund. And I was like, yes.
No time at all.
Much faster than I hoped for. And I'm so jazzed. I'm so, so excited.